Amen. These introductory presentations, we're looking at the subject of methodology. Not sure how long we'll spend on this subject, but as I try to indicate at the beginning of this camp meeting, I'm doing a series of 3 consecutive weekends, 3 different camp meetings covering 3 different geographical areas across the world. This first one is the African continent, the next is Oceania, and the third is the Americas. And I just referred to those 3 geographical areas in respect to their time zones. So even though I mentioned Africa now, this is really Europe and Africa. So the next 3 weekends should cover, I think, if not all of the world, most of the world, at least most of the major areas that our movement is located in. So what people may struggle with is the fact that I suspect that the subject matter will just continue from one camp to another. I may do some recap, but I don't think it will just be a repeat and enlarge from one camp meeting to another. So we'll get as far as we can at this camp meeting with the material that I want to share with you, and what doesn't get covered, I'll probably continue in my next series for those of you who are wondering about the direction in which we're headed. So we began speaking about methodology, as we all know, looked at hermeneutics, and even though we didn't focus upon the dictionary definition of the word, what I really want us to understand is that there is a science and there is an art to deriving the meaning of a particular author. And what we must be careful about is not to just read, but to understand the meaning behind what is written. And this has been a problem that it's not a problem just for this movement or Adventism or just Christians in general. This is a problem that all human beings face, whether it's communication in the written form, in the verbal form, or even non-verbal communication. We can all see someone blinking or winking at us, but it doesn't mean that you know what they mean. You could see someone grimacing at you with a facial expression that could feel that you might feel intimidating, but unless you understand the meaning of that facial expression, you can come to a wrong conclusion. Maybe they're not angry, maybe they are in pain. And if you're like me, when you use a social media app, particularly WhatsApp, and you start using emojis, some of them are very simple to understand. They're straightforward. You have a pointed finger or a thumbs up or a smile or a cry. But some of the ones that are not so straightforward, I think some of those emojis are not that clear, at least to me. For instance, if you were blushing, what emoji would you use? Because when you look at them, you have a few options, and either if you went to, which there is, an emoji dictionary, or emoji encyclopedia that tells you what each of these emojis mean. And if you were to do that, you would find that some of those emojis that seem simple, because that's what they're designed to be, are actually quite complicated. And they can express a range of human emotions. And if you're not careful, you can get yourself into some difficulty if you send someone an emoji, because you might mean one thing and they may take you to mean something different. And I'm guessing many of us have experienced that problem. What you have experienced, if you've had this problem before, is the subject of hermeneutics. You can put an emoji on your message thinking something, but the recipient has to guess what it is that you really mean to say to them. 90% of the time, it's straightforward. If I'm happy, I'll give you a smile. If I'm unhappy, I'll give you a frown or a tear. But some of those emojis are not that clear. And you might have a friend, if you're a girl and you like a boy, that you might want to express some affection to that boy to indicate that you like them. And you might send an emoji that does that. And they might just read, oh, she's just a friendly sister. They may misunderstand. Or vice versa, you might be sending a friendly emoji and the recipient might read into that emoji some emotion, some intent that is not there. That is a real life example of hermeneutics. So we're all having to deal with this subject. You cannot escape it in real life. How we communicate one with another and what a person really means when they say something. I'm sure many of you, when trying to communicate with someone, if it's either long or complex, you will switch from words to voice. You do a voice chat, and the reason you will do that is because the words are unable to express how you feel correctly. Or you want to give someone not only communication with the words itself, but you also want to have intonation or the tone. So if you want to give even more expression, you would do a video chat so someone can actually see your face as you're speaking to them. All of this is connected to the subject of hermeneutics. And so you can't escape the subject even if you tried to. We discussed this yesterday, all of this. We then discussed the problem of approaching the spirit of prophecy. Ellen White is too familiar, too friendly, too cozy, too laid back in her language. It's not technical, it's common, it's a conversational style of writing. And because of this style that she has, we can be disarmed, we can become beguiled, that we are actually reading a technical document. And most of us do not approach the spirit of prophecy in that fashion. Over the years, I have tried to encourage teachers in this movement, which means all of you, to be more didactic, more precise, when analyzing the spirit of prophecy. A few examples would be: when was the statement written? To whom was it written? What is the context of the statement? What is happening in the church at that time? What is happening in the world at that time? All of those questions need to be considered when trying to interrogate inspiration. And by and large, most of us do not do a very good job of that. We're learning, and it's not that we're incompetent, it's just that we have been ignorant that that is what we should be doing. And as I say, over the years, months, weeks, I believe there has been quite a lot of movement, quite a lot of change in the thinking of people with respect to this subject. So we discussed that at length. I framed it in the following statement: how do we read a 19th century prophet in the 21st century? Can we read that person as though they were immediately with us and they were communicating to us in real time, in the present tense? And that is what we do far too often. And I have said that that is a wrong way to approach inspiration. We don't do that when we read the Bible. For instance, if you look at marriage customs, if you look at dress codes, if you look at lifestyle practices, if you look at the types of jobs people would have, we don't go to the Bible to find our inspiration on many of those subjects. Many people in Scripture either become soldiers or shepherds. And we don't go to the Bible to choose our career options, do we? We don't do that. You don't read of people in the Bible going to some kind of institution of learning to become doctors or engineers or accountants. The only profession that I think that we could glean from inspiration is that of the legal trade, lawyers, scribes, and that is always seen in a negative sense. So what I'm saying is, when we go to the Bible, we approach the Bible in a very, I will say, careful fashion. We don't seek advice from the Bible on things that are pertinent to us in the 21st century, which we know was substantially different to those people centuries before us. We don't go and seek for counsel on how to have a dinner party, how to order our family, how to conduct a wedding ceremony, how to engage in a courtship, in a relationship with someone that you're interested in. We don't go to the Bible to find out examples of how that should be done. Why don't we do that? Because we know that the customs and practices that are shown to us in the scriptures are not applicable to us here at the end of the world. So what we do is we take principles, we take ideas. Just an example of that, which people have begun to ask for various reasons. In the Bible, you'll see more often than not that marriages are carried out using using the system of arranged marriages, that someone above you, more often than not your parents, will arrange a marriage for you. And we know that most of us don't practice that today. We have a completely different way of finding our prospective partners. Even perhaps the worst example that you find in the Bible, Samson, who finds his own wife, even he has to go to his parents and cajole them, pressurize them to actually initiate this marriage, to get it working. He can't just run away and do his own thing. So we approach the Bible in a very specific way. But when we come to Ellen White, the way we approach Ellen White is completely different. We look for pragmatic and practical help, assistance from her in many of the lifestyle choices. The problem is, so much of what she says is no longer applicable today. Now, this is not a statement of whether or not we should vote or not. But if you go to Ellen White and ask her about the voting system, there are a number of questions you could ask. You could ask, are we allowed to vote? She would answer. But you could also ask, I'm a woman. What are your thoughts on women being given the vote? And she will tell you. Now, her response to the issue of women voting, not specifically to do with Adventist voting, is that she thinks women should not vote. And of course, we don't believe that. We would never advocate that. We would never send a message to the world if we were asked our opinion on whether or not women are allowed to vote today. Mixed race marriages. Ellen White is very clear, very specific about what people can marry. So she gives counsel and advice on different races marrying one another and the problems and of why we should or should not do such things. And it extends way beyond the issue of marriage. She even talks about what kind of messages a pastor would give to a black congregation compared to a white congregation. She speaks about the types of books that should be published for one race compared to another race. And we know that all of us would find such statements not only strange today, but abhorrent, and in many parts of the world, actually illegal if it was enforced. So we have a lot of evidence to indicate and show that when we approach Spirit of Prophecy, we need to realize that she is not the prophet for our dispensation. This is why when the time of the end comes, 1989, and we're going to move from a dispensation of scattering to gathering, God has to raise up a new messenger, because that new messenger is going to have to give new information. We can call it new light if you like. And he's going to explain to people how they are supposed to read and interact with inspiration, because it is different to how people had read inspiration before. So we covered all of these topics yesterday in those two classes. And I can't reiterate enough this, the emphasis, or this point that we need to be anchored in, that over and over again, we need to be very careful on how we read anybody from a dispensation that comes before us. I've explained Ellen White's ministry in different ways. And if I can just say it this way, she is a messenger that presides over a church, that is the caretaker of a church, a guide of the church that is in rebellion or that is being scattered. It's a scattered church that she has to guide and direct. And not only is she an observer, and if you have watched previous presentations of mine, if you were to think about Matthew 13, verse 24 to verse 30, the parable of the wheat and tares, that if you were to overlay the work of angels onto that study, that particularly if you thought about the second and the third angel, that the third angel is not part of the details of the story. And the way I've explained it before is that they're not the recipients. So in that story, this is the story of a field. In fact, if we turn to Matthew 13, verse 24. Matthew 13, verse 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. And you have to ask yourself the question, it says the kingdom of heaven is like something. And what is the kingdom of heaven like? Is it like the man? Is it like the seed? Or is it like the field? You have a choice of three. That's what I would propose. This is not a new study on Matthew 13, 24. I have covered this subject time and time again over the last 4 years. What I want to say to people is, if they're able to locate where I've spoken on these issues before, to go back to those passages. If someone knows dates or camp meetings, they could post them on our chat here. But I want to suggest you have a choice of 3 options. Is the kingdom of heaven like a man? Is it like seed? Or is it like field? And I would suggest, based upon my study of this subject, if you use parable teaching, compare and contrast, that without discussing how you do that, what you will find is that the kingdom of heaven is the field. The field is what the kingdom of heaven is like, not the man and not the seed. The man and the seed are ancillary subjects. They help and assist to understand the story about the field, which is the story about the kingdom of heaven. It's all about that field. And if that's the case, then we need to understand what the role of the various players are, the various participants in this story about the kingdom of heaven. And if I were to move on a couple of verses, in verse 27, it speaks about the servants. The man in verse 24 is now called a householder. So we'll move away from the man and we'll move to the servants and the seed. And what I want us to see is that the servants do not live in the field. They work in the field, but they don't live in the field. They don't have their feet buried in the soil in the same way that the seeds have their roots buried in the soil. So there are two groups. There are these plants who are stuck in the field, and there are these servants who observe what happens to and in the field. And if we were to take those two parties, those two living things, the plants and the servants, I'm suggesting we can overlay angels over them. The seed represents those who get some benefit. They receive something. The servants represents those people who observe or look. They have no intimate connection with the field itself. They go and look and then they go away. The seed are embedded into that field. So they have this intimate connection. So I want us to think about it in this way. The seed are the recipients and the servants are the observers or the caretakers. In fact, the plants, the seed, are the recipients of the watch care of the servants. So if we can think about it in that context, the relationship between the two, what I want us to see is that the plants are an intimate part of the story because they are intimately connected with the field. And another element that has to be introduced into this story is the rain. They receive benefit from the rain and from the field. And the servants just observe what's going on. They're an outside party. They are not affected by the soil. They are not personally affected by the rain. It doesn't do anything for them. The rain makes the plants grow. The rain does not make the servants grow, doesn't change them, doesn't make them more intelligent. It does absolutely nothing for the servants, but it does everything for the plants, as does the field in which they live. Now, when we take that concept and bring it to Ellen White, I gave a few examples. Like every single one of us, Ellen White will act like a plant and she will act like a servant, by which I mean she is an observer of current affairs, the things that are going on in her own generation, whether internally or externally. So she is a recipient, also not just an observer. So she observes what's happening, we understand that, but she's also partaking or a part of everything that is happening. And being a plant, she will grow or wither depending upon the nature and the quality, the quantity of the rain and the environment in which she lives. So we can pretend to think that Ellen White is a prophet, that I don't know if we're all familiar with this term, an ivory tower. An ivory tower is a word picture that describes someone who is not involved in the day-to-day affairs or the intricacies of what is going on in the general populace. You could think about a king who isn't touched personally by the pain and the heartache that his subjects must go through, or a dictator, depending on which model you have. So we could think that Ellen White just observes what is happening and isn't personally touched or personally affected by her environment. And as a prophet, we could make that argument. But she is affected. She lives in her own dispensation. And in that dispensation, she imbibes many of the thoughts, sentiments, and ideas that are floating around in society. I want to just pause there. I want to keep this thought, but I want to have a different reference point, one that we had already discussed before in our earlier presentation. So we speak about prophets and degrees of inspiration, which is all good and well. And I've said I've tried to avoid doing that. And we want to discuss how we view inspiration. How do we view what prophets instruct or teach us? And what has happened is, when Adventists have approached inspiration, spirit prophecy, they have done one of two things. They have rejected her writings because they see too many problems, or they do something that I've called cognitive dissonance. Their brains just shut down and they ignore the problems. Basically, they pretend that there isn't a problem when there is one. And part of what I want us to understand, which I think for many of us is a hard saying, perhaps even a rude awakening, and that is this: that prophets are not immune to the dispensation in which they live. They are affected by cultural norms, and they're affected to such a degree that it permeates, I'll use a stronger word than permeate, infiltrates their writings. And I think this is something that many of us have been, and perhaps still are, unwilling to accept. As I said, as the Bible teaches, this is a hard saying, who can hear it? But unless you are willing to see this, which what I want to call reality, you are forced to do two things: either suppress the obvious truth and carry on ignoring things, or you walk away from the spirit of prophecy. I think you're forced to come to one of those two conclusions. And Ellen White teaches those who reject her writings will eventually reject the Bible. And I believe that is true. The difficulty is when people reject Ellen White, and she says they will also reject the Bible, what they will not reject in the Bible is the pure, clean, simple concept of morality. you might call it the golden rule, or some variation of that. Just because you reject the Bible, it doesn't mean you now become an evil despot or a demon. You can still be a beautiful, nice person and reject the Bible. I've discussed this many times already about the role of Scripture, the role of God in the development of a human being. I would refer people back. I would refer people back to the studies in 2017 on the nature of man. If I could ask either the Shona or the Zulu translator to make whatever technical changes, because I can hear them on my mic. Thank you. Why do I bring all of that up? It's because if we want to be true to what we read, if we don't want to throw away Spirit of Prophecy, if we want to read her works holistically, not cut up pieces here and pieces there, hold on to the bits that I like and throw away the bits that I don't like, if we're not going to do that, we have to understand hermeneutics, which means we have to understand how we read, how we understand, what we read. If we don't, we'll ignore things. And the problem is, we don't live in a new world where everybody has all of these questions that people didn't have in the past. There's nothing new under the sun. We're not more sophisticated or cleverer than our forefathers. There's no difference, really. Human beings have not evolved into a cleverer species. We have not evolved, but we have developed into a holier people than we were in past ages. I would contend that that is a fact, and I would defend that. I believe it is defensible, and the only people that could defend that truth, because it is a truth, are people in this movement. And the only way you can defend that is if you properly understand line upon line methodology. So I think we have not become more intelligent per se, but humanity has become more holy. Just trying to gather my thoughts again. Sometimes it's easy to get distracted on a Zoom class. So when we approach Spirit Prophecy, we need to do so carefully. We need to have a robust answer in the example that I gave about voting rights for women. I'm not arguing whether or not we should vote. That is a separate subject that I'm not dealing with. I'm dealing with the subject of whether women can or cannot vote. And the question is, why would Ellen White say women should not vote? And today we have a different perspective. What was happening? Is there something wrong about voting in her generation that now is correct? Or is she being influenced by the times in which she lives to make statements that are frankly not accurate or truthful statements, that women should not vote? Is that a dispensational issue? Is it that they can't vote now, but in the future they would be able to vote? there's no indication that Ellen White speaks about things in those terms, because she always speaks about the world coming to its end, the great controversy ending, the second advent coming in as a present truth message. So there is no future in her thinking. At the end of the world, as she views it, women should not vote. Now we are still living in the same time frame as Ellen White, the end of the world. So at the end of the world, if you were to ask us, what would we say? Are women allowed to vote? We would say yes. And therefore you get into a problem, because now we stand in contradiction to the spirit of prophecy. And if you're going to do that, you need to have a good explanation of how and why you're doing this. And to put it simply, on this example, the explanation is this: that Ellen White is not per se giving some gospel truth that God has given to her that says women are not fit to vote. What actually she is doing is, obviously there's a combination of things, but one of the underlying drivers of a statement such as that is her own sexist perspective of the role of women. It's as simple and as base as that. Ellen White is a product of her own generation, of her own dispensation. And unless we recognize that, we will continue to make mistakes how we read her writings. Another example is the subject of the Sunday law, the subject of the papacy, and Ellen White's perspective of the United States and the papacy as a Protestant in the United States living in that environment. Of course, there is prophetic truth. She's an observer of what is transpiring in the world. She believes that the second advent is about to occur, and she believes that correctly. I'm not arguing that point, but she also lives in a culture that has shaped and molded her thinking of what right and wrong is, the place of the United States, the weakness of other countries. And based upon the information at hand, based upon the dispensation in which she lives, but also based upon her thoughts and views which have been given to her through education, through the culture in which she lives, she makes statements that need to be modified and changed today. We don't live in the same world today. The standing and the placing or the international position of the United States today is different than it was back in her day. Russia, India, China. If I were to just use the word, the BRIC countries, we know that the shift of power, the shift of geopolitical influence has changed. In her day and age, there was no such thing as the United Nations. There was no United Nations. There was not even really a precursor to the United Nations. So when Miller was confronted with developing a story about the end of the world, and Ellen White is confronted with those same issues, her perspective is different to ours, not only dispensationally, but culturally. So I can't emphasize that point enough. Yesterday, we began to look at the need of hermeneutics, and I gave 3 pointers. I just want to recap those 3, and I want to move on to some other reasons why we need hermeneutics. There aren't that many, but it's only, I think, maybe 1 or 2 more. So point 1, if you recall, was even though you read something, I can read the English words, I can pronounce them, I have a vague understanding of what those words mean. I could go to a dictionary if I wasn't sure, but just reading, they may be intelligible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I understand the meaning of the statement. Now, if that sounds vague to you, like if I were to say, blessed are the poor in spirit, each one of those words, you know what they mean. If you string the sentence together, you'll say, I have a pretty good idea of what that means. Just a simple point, which I have shared numerous times now, so you're probably all aware. When Jesus, in Matthew 5, I think it's 22 or 20. Matthew, verses 2 and 3. Says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those people that are poor in spirit are not good people. They're bad people. And when I make a statement like that, a strong, bold statement, people are taken aback and they see a contradiction, because if they're so bad, how can the kingdom of heaven be theirs? And this is a simple, nice example about the words are intelligible, but the meaning is unclear. It shouldn't take us Ellen White to work this out. But Ellen White, in Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, I think it's chapter 1, pages 6 and 7, she explains this in a really neat and succinct way. And I just want us to think about this one thing. If we were to talk about poor in spirit and change the word poor into the word destitute, those who are destitute of the spirit, they have no spirit. Now, whatever spirit you may think that is, whether it's the Holy Spirit or your own godly spirit, you know that someone who is destitute is someone who has nothing. So how can someone who has no spirit, either the Holy Spirit or their own good spirit, ever be a candidate for heaven? How could they ever own heaven? When you think about it, when you use hermeneutical principles, it becomes clear to see what is being referred to here. This is a nice verse because it talks about not the reality of a person's situation, but about the potentiality of a person's future. I'll rephrase that. This is not about a person's present tense experience about their certain future, but rather it's a statement of the potentiality of them having a good end. Jesus meets people who are dead in trespasses and sins, and he offers them the possibility of coming out of their poor experience into a rich experience. Now, as I say, this is not a study on the Beatitudes. Ellen White does an excellent job of that in her introductory thoughts in the book Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, as I say, page 6 and 7. But I wanted us to see how easy it is to not understand the meaning of the statement in a simple example. That was point one. Oh, and just another point. There's a cliche phrase that's now going around the movement that's used as a hammering block to beat us up, which is it's expressed two ways: a plain reading or a "Thus saith the Lord." Some people might say plain English, depending on your language, of course. So a plain reading or a "Thus saith the Lord." All of that, sentiment, that idea, is being attacked in point one that I'm making. The need for hermeneutics is there is no such thing as a plain reading of God's word or a "Thus saith the Lord" in the way that people make it appear. What you will find when we want to understand the meaning of a statement is that as a minimum, it's on two levels. The Bible is encoded in 3 dimensions. You have a 2-dimensional sphere or surface, and this is a moral surface. This is morality. And almost everything in Scripture is written in a moral framework. However, there is a deeper meaning to everything that is written. And the deeper meaning, if I can use a term which I know is actually inaccurate, but I will do it anyway because it's a colloquial term that we use in the movement. So we read things at a moral level, but we should understand just under the surface, as Ellen White would call hidden treasure, is a prophetic understanding of what we are reading. There are 2 ways of understanding what we're reading. Again, this is not new. This is just a recap of how I've expressed things in the past. Surface words, we will call them treasure. Surface treasure, which anybody and everybody can pick up. And if it's everybody, I'm saying it's literally everybody. You do not need to be a Christian to pick up surface treasure. That is morality. And this is the great mistake that I'm going to just say Adventists have made. And we in the movement are making the same mistake we continue to do, and it's my hope that we stop doing, that we have this idea that morally speaking, we are special. There is some special insight that we have, morally speaking. Surface treasure, anybody can pick up. You don't need any tools. Hidden treasure, you need a tool. If it's just under the surface, you can use your hands. You can grab and claw away at the soil and find a treasure. But to go any further, you need specialist equipment. We'll call it a spade or a shovel. So you need tools to go to the hidden treasure. And hidden treasure is out of the sight of normal people. And in the past, I've given the example of going to a tropical island, treasure island, if you like, and you sit on a beach and you think you are enjoying all the pleasures that this island has to offer: sun, sea, air, but you're not. What you don't realize, just underneath you is a box of treasure that was hidden there by a pirate from past ages. And if you were just minded to think about where you are, you should be spending your time digging up that treasure and gaining true wealth. You know, whatever that money is, $100,000. That would be true wealth, not just sitting on the beach soaking up the sun. Please don't comment on that statement. Don't read into it something that you shouldn't. This is the way we need to approach scripture. And that's what this first point does. You can read the words. You think you know what it means to say, turn the other cheek. But there are deep prophetic statements in anything that we read. Point two. Point two is on the board. Some people make this mistake when you see two parts here, that two parts make a whole. So I spoke about that. I gave two examples, in fact. I gave the example of this picture work here, and I gave the example here. If you remember, this was the subject of psychology. And is psychology a pursuit of satanic concepts and principles, or the pursuit of godly principles? And Ellen White will tell you both. And if you wanted to collect all the passages on psychology and you had these two, half and half don't make a whole. They cancel each other out. So you have to be careful. Now, there is a technical term for this idea of a part equals the whole. So obviously, this part does not equal the whole. You can't use a statement that Ellen White says psychology is satanic, which is only a part of the story. You cannot use that part to infer that is what the whole teaches, because it doesn't. You cannot take this statement where it says psychology is a godly principle, which is a part, and use that part to fully explain the whole. So the word that describes this principle, I'll write it down for you. I'll say the word first. It's called a synecdoche. Synecdoche. I'll write it down for you. So a synecdoche is, I'm sure people can look it up on Google. A synecdoche, I'm going to explain it in a moment, but it's connected to this concept of a part explaining the whole. And it's connected to another word, which is a metonymy. Metonymy. So there's a synecdoche and there's a metonymy. Metonymy and synecdoche. I'm hoping that people can see those two words. So a synecdoche is part of a metonymy, sorry, I keep mispronouncing it. So if this was metonymy, a synecdoche would be part of that. So a synecdoche is a subset of a metonymy. These are both Greek words, and metonymy means change of name. So you have a name and you're going to change the name. So you're going to have a substitute name. Now, we use biblical terminology, biblical phrases, or not even biblical phrases, I should say, religious terminology, not biblical, religious terminology. And we don't normally use the word metonymy. We might use the word symbology. So if I said metonymy means change of name, or substitute name, you begin to see how this becomes a very similar concept to symbology. So I'll give a kind of a dictionary definition of this. Metonymy is the substitution of the name for another name. So let me try and give an example if I can. So I'll give an example. I'm sure, even though this is an international audience, because of the subject matter, I've tried to use one that we could all be familiar with. If I were to say the Pentagon, now we all know what a pentagon is. This is the Pentagon. Is this the Pentagon? No, it's not. Of course, this is not the Pentagon. This is a pentagon. So if I were to say to you, what is, and having a discussion, a lecture, a prophetic study, and I said the Pentagon, what would all of you say I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure that all of us would know what I'm referring to. Of course, it's the headquarters of the Department of Defense, the DoD in the United States, in Washington. So the Pentagon is a common metonymy of this building or the headquarters of the Defense Department. So that's an example of a metonymy. I'm just going to see if I can come up with another one for us. So metonymy means, the Greek word itself means a change of name. So I didn't want to spend too much time on this idea of metonymy, but there is a subset of metonymies, which is syndices. Some of these Greek words get me tongue-tied. So I'll give another example of metonymy. If I were to say, talking about a friend of mine who is a musician, I could say, my friend plays Beethoven really well. Now, you know, my friend does not get Beethoven, who is dead, pulled him out of his grave and plays with him. Everybody would know when I say my friend plays Beethoven beautifully, what I'm referring to is his music. So Beethoven becomes the metonymy of music. Give another example. I enjoy reading Paul, or I enjoy reading Shakespeare, or I enjoy reading Dickens, or I enjoy reading Moses. Of course, I don't enjoy reading Moses. Moses is not there. I don't enjoy reading Shakespeare or Paul. What I enjoy reading is what they have written, their works. So in the example that I gave, Shakespeare would be a metonymy of his words or his writings or his plays. So that is a metonymy. It's a figure of speech. We might call it symbology. So it's a figure of speech in which a word is used as a substitute for another word, and the association has to be clear, otherwise it means nothing. Often, if we were going to speak about President Donald Trump, we would say the White House, and we could use the term the White House interchangeably with the US president. So I want us to hopefully have an understanding of what a metonymy is. And what I really want us to see is what a syndicate is. Now, as I said, a syndicate is a form or a type of metonymy. It also is a figure of speech. But in this figure of speech, syndicate, a syndicate is when you take a part of something to mean the whole of something. A part is used to express the whole. So again, it's a Greek word, and it's comes from two words. It means to take up together. Together, take up. It's part of two words. And when you understand its role in English, let me just make sure that I explain this clearly enough, hopefully, for people. It's a verb. It means to take or to receive from another. That's what this word means, syndicate. You take something or you receive something from someone else or something else. And I'll give some examples. When I give some examples, I think you'll understand how this principle works. So you can either get the part to explain the whole, or you can get the whole to explain the part. It works both ways. And what people in our movement, because this is obviously this is what we're talking about, when it comes to this issue of a part is used to explain the whole, and I gave these examples, the technical difficulty that, or the realm in which we're at, is called syndicates. So let me give some examples. So I think you'll get the point that I want to make. So some of these things may not work in all languages because some of these syndicates are specific, are culturally specific. So if I said, my friend John got a set of wheels, what would that mean? If I said he's got some wheels, most of us would understand that that means he has got some transportation. If he was 18 and he had passed his driving test and I said, oh, John's got some wheels now, everyone would know that what I mean is that he has a new car. Wheels are part of the car. So the part would explain the whole. We can see the connection. I don't need to say the whole of the car. I can just say wheels. Give another example, but I'll do it the other way round. So Jamaica beat England at cricket. So this is the other way around. The whole is now going to explain the part. Did the whole of Jamaica beat the whole of England at cricket? Of course it didn't. What you're referring to is the Jamaican cricket team beat the English cricket team. So you can use the whole. Jamaica beat England. You can take the whole and use it to explain the part. Use another example. This is not something that I would use, but people use a phrase like this. Can you spare your wallet? What does that mean? Can you spare your wallet? what you're actually asking somebody is, can they spare something that's in their wallet, which is money? So the synecdoche can be used either way. The part explains the whole, or the whole explains the part. So we have synecdoches and metonymies. Synecdoches are part of metonymies, and they're substitutionary words. But the point about a synecdoche is that the part of something is equal to the whole, or as I say, is used to explain the whole. So the wheels are really the car. And you can see the problem with this. If I said, again, this is probably something that English people would understand. If I said number 10, talking about politics, give some context. And if I said number 10 said this thing yesterday, what would I be referring to? What would that mean if I said number 10 said something? All of us would know that I'm speaking about the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, because the Prime Minister lives at number 10. I don't even need to give the street name, because we all know it's number 10, Downing Street. So I just need to say number 10, and everyone knows who and what I'm speaking about, which is Boris Johnson. These are examples of synecdoches. And this is the problem that people are facing here. When I said this example, you can't take this. This is not a synecdoche, because this statement about psychology that says it's satanic, this part of psychology does not equal the whole. And neither does this one. So these are not synecdoches. When we spoke yesterday, I didn't give that, I guess it's a grammatical term. I didn't use that phrase, but I wanted to see the principle. But now I want us to see it's actually a linguistic tool, a rule of grammar that you can research, and you can actually see the principles that we are employing in our movement. These are proper systems and methods. They're not just things that we make up. They're not just specific to our movement. And we are falling foul. We are making mistakes at multiple levels in our approach to our prophetic message. And we need to be extremely careful. And people do this ignorantly, and often, when I say malicious, I don't mean that they're evil, but when they're warned to be cautious, people are throwing caution to the wind and think that they can just make statements in a movement that is now mature enough to challenge bad behavior. And what I mean by bad behavior, I mean bad methodology. So this one is a really important point that people keep on making mistake after mistake on. So I'll give the word again. Synecdoches. I always get it wrong. Synecdoches is not taking a partial statement, a part of something, and making it equal to the whole. So the whole is psychology. Psychology is not a satanic subject. Only a part of psychology is satanic, and that part does not equal the whole. This is not a synecdoche, and too many of us are using statements that way. Neither is this one, by the way. Psychology is a godly thing. That is not a synecdoche. that part information is not a full explanation of what psychology is. And the third point that we mentioned, as we close now, run out of time, is that words evolve in meaning. And I gave 3 examples of that yesterday. I gave 2 examples from Ellen White's day, from the 19th century into the 21st century. An easy one is gay. I'm not going to comment any further on that one. Nicest. If I said this was the nicest work to do, and by the way, the context of this nicest is in the education of our children. So Ellen White says the nicest work is the education of children. It's a paraphrase. And what she means is this is one of the hardest, most difficult works that there is to do, not the nicest, the most pleasant jobs that there is to do. But we would not understand that unless we were really careful about seeing how words evolve. And another one is the shut door. In 8 short years, Ellen White's definition of the shut door here changed to what she later understood the shut door to mean. And I think this is really important. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't say, I'm sorry, it's all a mistake. All she did was just change the definition and moved on. It's really fascinating, particularly this issue, how people challenge her and say, you taught error here, and she just, just sort of pushes these arguments aside and say, this is the proper definition. Her thinking evolves on this subject, and not only this one, on other subjects. It's quite common for a person's position to evolve. And I want us to remember what I said earlier, how influenced prophets are by their own environment. And I want to say this is an example of this. It's not like God changed his mind in 8 years and said, oh, the shut door meant this in 44 and now it means this in 52. The definition of what had happened in that history, in October 22nd, 1844, when there was a shut door, whatever that shut door meant in 44, it meant the same thing in 52, and it means the same thing today. Objectively, from God's perspective, as he viewed what was happening, Ellen White's thinking on the subject changes. It evolves. Why would it do that? Because even as a prophet, she learns and adapts and changes. She grows in her understanding. And if we're not willing to see and accept that, we will fall foul on many points as we investigate her writings and try to understand what she's trying to teach us. We need to close. I want to thank you for all participating in this study, and we'll meet again later this afternoon. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We ask and pray as we study your word carefully, systematically, that we would begin to employ rules and methods that you have given to us and use them carefully. Please help us and guide us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.